Welcome, colleagues. Um, Welcome to what we hope is going to be a thought-provoking discussion on a topic that is very relevant in the current context. We are going to talk about data. Everybody likes data, and this is a congregation of evaluators, so we like data even more. Um, um, we discussed, this has also been the running theme that, how massive quantities of data are being generated and processed very swiftly, thanks to some path-breaking data collection and processing technology and the emergence of AI. And this has meant that there has been really a multiplication of uh, actors in what I like to call the data ecosystem. And the ecosystem around data are really the producers of data, people who are, generating the data. It could be me generating data for my iPhone, or it could be the National Statistical Office, which is collecting data from households. It as well as a proliferation of data analysts. A lot of people are processing the data, using the data, analyzing the data, and then eventually data users, the decision makers who use data. So we now have very diverse players in the field, and in this discussion, we will explore how one of these players, which is the state, the government, is investing in its capacity to analyze and use data. How is it working for non-state workers in this respect? And what has been the learning so far? So what we have with you is a very interesting panel. Our panelists all come from very diverse backgrounds. We have Mr. McMoney and Seth Meng will join us very soon, who are from IFAD and the Ministry of Agriculture in Cambodia, respectively. We also have Karan Nagpal from ID Insight, which is an organization that supports in thinking innovatively about data, and Anurag, also who represents the government of India. And I am from IFAD. I am Bidisha Barua. I am lead technical specialist at IFAD. We hope that in this panel, we want to share with you the collective experiences that we have had working with each other. Let me first take a bit of time to formally introduce our panelists. Dr. Karan Nagpal is India Regional Director for ID Insight, a research, data analytics, and advisory organization. Karan and his organization have been working closely with many governments in providing advisory supports toward data use. Mr. McMoney is the Director of the Department of Planning and Statistics, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries of Cambodia since 2014. Cambodia is a country that is part of the 50 by 2030 initiative, and a multi-partner initiative that aims to invest in country data systems to enable and strengthen countries to produce and use agricultural data. Mr. Anurag Kundu has served as Chairperson, Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights, the apex statutory authority of the Delhi government to monitor and evaluate the implementation of rights and policies and advise on matters related to early childhood care and development. He has been part of the core team of the Delhi government's education team that conceptualized and anchored the widely acclaimed education reforms in the country. Mr. Seth Meng, who's not here but who will join us at 4:30, is IFAD Country Director for Mongolia and Country Program Officer for Cambodia. So without losing much of time, I think just a quick a few comments on house rules. I think we will have this conversation for maybe 60 minutes, and then we will open the house for questions, which will be around 20 minutes of Q&A, if that's fine for you. So let's get started. Maybe I start with you, Karan. Karan, can you please talk about your organization and how it thinks about data within the government, drawing from any specific example? Within this example, can you tell us what was unique about the approach, and what did you feel are conditions that are necessary for these approaches to have an impact?
Can you all hear me? Okay, yes, you can. Yes. Thank you so much, Bidisha, and thank you for the organizers for, inviting us to curate this panel. As Bidisha said, ID Insight is a research consulting organization. We were founded about 11, 12 years ago, depending on what founding means, with the premise that, in academia, there's a lot of analytical, rigorous work that is published in journals that, academia has developed a number of very analytical tools, RCTs, sample surveys, very rigorous ways of doing things. And often these studies happen in partnership with governments or non-profit organizations. But the primary focus of these studies is to generate knowledge, is to, publish a paper in an academic journal. And that is how the system is set up, which is valuable. But the founders felt that there was a gap in the market for organizations that were using tools that were similarly rigorous and analytical, but where the primary focus was to help the client, was to help the government or the nonprofit. And then if publication would happen, that's great, but that wasn't the main goal of the work. The main goal was to use that same level of analytical rigor, but apply it in a practical consulting model, with the, a North Star being improving people's lives. And so we all believed that if governments and nonprofits and the development sector in general would use better data, that would lead to them providing better services to citizens, beneficiaries, etc. And through that, lives would improve. Um, so the three features that ID Insight sort of imbibes in any project is we want to be very demand driven. So we wanted to say that, was there a very specific question that a government or an NGO partner cared about? And so was that demand coming from them, or were we the ones sort of producing research with the hope of, that leading to change in the world? So we wanted to be in the very first sort of bucket of saying this is, government explicitly has asked for this type of question. The second is, as I said, being practical, being rigorous within constraints. So, in the sort of event, just the plenary event just before this, I think Veronique mentioned this interesting example of, they did all the research on the COVID package, but by the time it came up before the board had already decided not to actually renew the package. And so, we all believed, ID Insight's founding premise was that if people are not using our insights, our data, our evidence, then that's a failure for us. And if we do very rigorous work that then misses that decision making window, then it's, kind of a failure. So we therefore work backwards from saying, what are the decisions that need to be informed, when, by whom, what therefore information is needed to take those decisions. And often the answer is actually they don't need something rigorous. So they don't need an RCT, or they don't actually even need us. They can just, sometimes we work with clients where they say, we need to do this study, and we're like, actually you don't. You already know what you want to do, and you should just do it. You should not spend resources on doing a study to prove what you already know. And the third is, being very decision relevant. So as I said, we care about what is a win for us, a success for us, as if the decision was informed. And I think, our partnership with the Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights with Anurag actually is a great example of how these things came into place, into practice in a very interesting setting, where for us it was very important work because what the DCPCR's mandate was to make sure that child rights were protected within Delhi. Of course, Anurag can give you the more formal definition of the mandate, but basically they had the mandate and power and responsibility to make sure that the departments of the Delhi state government were actually effectively delivering their services to improve child health, education, etc. And so one of those things was immunization. So now the Delhi government is supposed to deliver immunization to all children at certain age groups. And DCPCR wanted to make sure that that was actually happening. And if it was not, then to, figure out why it wasn't happening and then to improve it. Now, a very rigorous way of approaching this question would be to do a state. Delhi is a city and a state, so the most rigorous way would be you do a state level sample survey that's representative of the whole city. That's very rigorous in the sense that you spend a lot of resources doing a household listing, and then you sample from that, and then produce a year or 2 years later information on what the immunization coverage was, which by that time the individuals would have moved on, the people would have got transferred, and a lot of children in Delhi would have gone unimmunized, and therefore have worse health outcomes. And so one of the things that we really 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 value is having clients like Anurag who are able to negotiate and mediate between ID Insight's own fairly technocratic, technical, academic instincts and the administrative constraints or reality of government. So Anurag, for example, and he can speak more about it, identified, look, if you do this massive sample survey, it's not actually going to move the needle. What we need to do is do a rigorous survey so that the rigor is still important, because especially if you're producing data that the government is then it's saying the government data is wrong or the government is not doing its job, the government is going to question the rigor of that. So the quality of the data has to be absolutely rock solid, but to do it in a way where it'll actually move the needle. So if the political executive are the ones who actually take the decisions, right, and to whom the bureaucrats are accountable, then and political incentives are such that they want to be good, to serve their own constituents. So if you're able to produce those statistics for certain key constituencies, in the state, then you're able to get high-level political executive buy-in from chief minister and other political leaders to say, hey, this is not right. Not only are children saying that children in Delhi are not getting immunized is one thing, but saying children in my constituency of children of my voters are not getting is a lot more powerful for moving the needle. And so I think through that, highlighting where the gaps were, and then through that fixing those gaps, so say, are there any operational guidelines which need edits? Are there any institutional, if their variation of delivery of services is, if there's a lot of variation, then maybe the underlying problem is that we have not codified as a government what all needs to happen when by whom. And so using sort of sites to identify problems and then fix problems state-wise was kind of the approach we took with that project. I think in that, one of the innovations we did was, how do we move fast on sample surveys, right? So the traditional approach is to do a full household listing and then from there to sample. That's very costly, and so we had to leverage existing lists, existing sort of list of beneficiaries with government centers, and use a a dual frame sampling approach to actually say, are we being rigorous enough to generate these statistics, but can we do that at the speed required? Because government, many of you are from government organizations, you realize that governments move very fast and everyone wants the data as of yesterday. And so how do we account for that constraint while also making sure that quality is not being compromised is a super important challenge for us. And then in all of this, I think, having people in government who genuinely care about doing good and who will not be upset about bad news, to say that, we will often find ourselves working with governments in situations where the government may say, hey, I want to use this data to talk about how good I am, so any bad news therefore is not good for me. So I think we work sort of in an embedded fashion within governments, where we say our job here is not to make you look good or bad in the public eye. Our job is to tell you the truth, which we'll only tell you, so that you can take action to fix your systems, so that children get more immunized. And we saw that, right? So DCPCR had commissioned a number of high frequency surveys, and we were able to actually pick up on how that, the survey number, the first round, there was a number which was low, that led to lots of meetings with the departments, led to identification of problems. There's always these 5 stages of grief that governments go through, of sort of first rejection, then questioning that, hey, no, your sample size is too wrong, you asked the question in the wrong way, see, you used and here, my people don't understand, that's why your question is wrong, so there's all that. Then there's finally come to sort of bargaining and say, okay, so maybe next time you should do it like maybe in this block, and that's why you'll get a better result. And then finally saying, okay, maybe, what, actually, maybe they're right. I need to accept emotionally that us programs need to do better. And so, Anurag has been a great partner in that journey, in fact, in making us realize those 5 stages of responding to data. And And then we saw the numbers improve, right? So in subsequent surveys, this is the good thing about high frequency surveys, is that you actually are able to show that this monitoring, this intervention, these this wake up call almost to the government actually leads to impact. So we saw the coverage rates go up. Now, of course, in a causal way, we cannot attribute this to this work alone, right? In a perfect sense of the world, we would have done a randomized control trial and then randomly chosen which blocks to go in, but that type of setup is antithetical to actually driving change. And so I think I cannot causally claim that our work led to an improvement in more children getting immunized, but I don't want to do that. I mean, I care about more children getting immunized, and I think we achieved a little bit more of that. So that's an example, Bidisha, how we work and how we try to improve lives.
Thanks, Karan. And what I draw from what you've said is, the importance of working with the system. And that is something that, IFAD is also doing under the 50 by 2030 initiative, which is tailored to improve national data systems in 50 low and middle income countries by the year 2030, Cambodia being one of them. And this is and our work is actually quite similar to what broadly to the principles that you have stated, that we need to work for solutions that are adaptable for the government needs. And how can we build the capacity of the government to be self-reliant for data use? Because what happens is, if we are trying to move away from a model that creates dependency and instead builds self-sufficiency. That is the reason why we engage very closely with the government to build their own technical skills, to build their data analytical skills, to not really crunch numbers to the extent, but to be able to interpret and use data, and which is actually which are two very different concepts. I think in the plenary it was mentioned that the principles of evidence need to be ingrained is everybody's business. So the principles to interpret data is indeed everybody's business. And that's why we are working with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Department of Statistics there, to help these divisions to be able to interpret data. We don't expect them to run complex analysis, but we do expect them to be able to identify what is a good piece of data versus a bad, what is a good piece of evidence versus a bad. And I'll let Mr. McMoney actually come in on that. So actually, let me now move on, Anurag and Mr. McMoney, to you, and if you could both reflect on your experiences. Anurag, perhaps we can start with you and then move on to Mr. McMoney. How has your organization adopted data and evidence? And could you reflect on what factors really matter for organizations such as yours to use data and evidence?
Yeah, at the outset, you made my work look more intelligent than it is actually. So thanks for that. But on a more serious note, I think 2 or 3 factors matter. First, we use data all the time. I'm walking from here to another hall. There's a data visualization tool in my brain which tells me this is the door, and I've now come too close to the door. I now need to take a left. There's a clear data visualization happening in my mind. I'm using a Google map to read somewhere. I'm clearly reading data and acting on it in real time. Then how is it when we as human beings who use billions of data points every day, suddenly when the same data looks in the form of Excel sheets and a PowerPoint and a histogram or a pie chart, we start to shut down or we start to engage less? That is a question we need to answer. It's not that humans are default oriented towards collecting data, interpreting data, and acting on the data otherwise. So few factors matter. I speak only for India. I don't know about this about other countries. India is no longer, 5-10 years ago, I would say India is a data poor country. We weren't collecting sufficient data points about our citizens to be able to improve our public service delivery. Today, that is no longer the case. India is a very data-rich country. Because of penetration of technology, mobile phones, I mean, perhaps the lowest tariffs of internet in the world, um, India is really, and the flourishing of the dashboards and the MIS and the mobile apps, far too many sometimes. We are now a data-rich country. What we lack is that we are a system-poor country. So a system-poor and a data-rich country. And that's the reconciliation that we need to do. For instance, and that speaks to another reason why very often policymakers don't engage with evaluation processes as much as we should, because very often the evaluation processes, insights come far later than I need. If I need to immunize the children with, let's say, pneumonia vaccine today, tomorrow, the next week, the next month, the next year, and if an evaluation insight is coming months and years later, I mean, the only thing that it is worthy of is publishing a journal. It's not useful to me in that moment while I'm in charge of improving public service delivery with respect to immunization. So this time lag, which is why the previous panel also spoke about involvement of the policymakers during the evaluation process, which is why Ashwini spoke about, and what he spoke about makes it even more relevant, about learning as part of the process, not only after the process. And that's the reconciliation that we need to be doing as far as our engagement with data or evaluation is concerned. So yeah.
And what do you think really matters for you? What are the critical factors that you've already spoken about what matters for you to take up data and evidence, but what hinders you? What are the challenges? Can you reflect on that a bit?
Yes. I think the biggest challenge, and it's a challenge on both sides, and it's not necessarily a challenge of how we engage with the evaluation process, it's a challenge of social change in general. We must always meet people where they are, and not in a talking down way, in a respectful, dignified way. So when I took over as the commissioner in the child rights a few years ago, the first thing that I noticed was there was still paper-based mechanism. Everything was paper-based. So by 10 o'clock every morning, my personal office was full of nearly 1,000 files every day. Even somebody who wanted to lodge a complaint about a broken public service delivery would have had to either send us a letter or come physically. So literally the first reform that I did was shift to email. I'm a computer scientist by degree. And my friends absolutely used to, I was a butt of a joke that having earned computer science degree from a reasonably good college, all that I was ensuring my staff knows how to use emails, how to add attachments, how to download attachments, how do you convert Excel file into Google Sheets, how do you apply filters, how do you do basic data sorting, ascending order, descending order, and this. So basically, meet people where they are and start from there. Very often, our evaluation processes don't meet people where they are. They are meeting a very fictitious and perhaps an idealistic set of audience which doesn't exist. So meeting people where they are makes things relevant, and two, not in a talking down way. Because when I say, oh, you don't know how to attach a document in the email, or you don't know how to apply a filter and sort a piece of information in descending order, what I'm saying is, are you that stupid? And that's the larger issue of how we define intelligence only in a certain cognitive manner. And we do we say everything on the other front as well, but our behavior clearly reflects that our understanding a definition of intelligence is a very small cognitive set of actions that we can undertake. But having said that, meet people where they are, make things relevant. The timing becomes important. I was, in the earlier, when we were discussing earlier, if you were to ask me, for instance, Do you need food? My answer is no, because I'm not hungry. That doesn't mean I don't need food. I do need food. Ask me 4 hours later. My answer is going to be yes. So meet people where they are in terms of what the need is, in terms of their skill set, in terms of their biases, in terms of their aspirations, in terms of the inspirations. Meet people where they are.
Thanks, Anurag. And I think you made a very relevant point, which is that there is that about just the foundations, to meet people where they are, to admit that, to know where to start, to know your baseline. So I'll now pass it on to Mr. McMoney. Mr. McMoney, how is your department adopting data and evidence, and what are your thoughts on it? And welcome, Seth, to the panel.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the Dr. Bidisa and also the organizer for allowing me to join these important events. And perhaps I will not introduce myself as the coordinator already introduced. Actually, I am very glad to join this event, and I would like to share the real experience from our organization in data management. This also get the support, strong support from Initiative 50 to 20 City from IFRAD as well. Actually, our organization is the backbone of the ministry. We manage all the data from the subsector, including crop, livestock, fishery, forestry, etc. A lot of kind of data that we have to manage day by day. So what we try to create generate from this data, we produce it, just say the report, the periodic report, weekly report, and annual report. This report are also benefit to the stakeholder because the report already clearly mentioned about the analysis of the data in subsector, including the share of the the share of at the level of macroeconomy, the share of GDP to in agriculture sector, in subsector, and also agriculture labor force, and value added in agriculture to the economic aspect. And talking about the adoption and when our organization generate the report, this report mainly used for general stakeholder because they would like to see what the performance, what the achievement achieved by this sector. For example, what is the percentage of the labor force in agriculture? What is the rate of the agriculture growth year by year? What is the share of agriculture to economy, etc. So a lot of things that we think that it's important to share. And another thing is the data also, this report also not only used for the old ministry, but also for the stakeholder, for the line ministry, for development partner, for social society that friendly use. And if any problem with data, for example, forestry, cover, reuse, something like that, or we can talk together, we have a meeting together and review again the source of the data. Another thing we also produce for the used for the verification of how to say the sustainable development goals in indicator that we think that it is also difficult because some indicator like to be the how to say the cross sector indicator. So we need to coordinate with the relevant organization, for example, from land management, from water, from rural, from commerce, etc. So to verify how to achieve the SDG goal initiative indicator. Besides, we also think about the due to the COVID-19, due to the climate change, or also the uncertainty of the world. So we think that some data also need to reconstruct it in order to ensure the quality and the use accuracy of the data for the analysis, for evaluation, for development of things that the country need from the data. So I just focus only agriculture data, not rather than other data. This is what we have learned, we have make, we have implement day by day to manage our data in our organization. So just my sharing this experience. Thank you.
Sir, can you also reflect a bit on what do you need to use data and evidence better in your department, in your organization?
Of course, I think as I mentioned that due to the crisis, global regional crisis, climate change, COVID, and also uncertainty, the war, something like that. So of course, the capacity building is very important to, to build up from the grassroots to the central level, so that to ensure the data collection, data analysis, data use are properly one for development for effective for development of effectiveness. So we got a lot of assistance from the initiative 50 to 30, 2030 that build capacity through the conduct the training, technical training, more focus on the data use in Cambodia. The data used in Cambodia, we also conduct survey, agricultural survey, and also the agricultural census. So the data we collect all of these to analyze, to see by means of the training provided by IFAD.
Thank you, sir. So broadly, I think what we see as emerging is just the importance of having a foundational skills, and then to be able to really work and keep in mind the capacity and the needs of the organization that one is working with, to be really impactful and efficient. Seth, welcome, and I would like to now move on to a next set of questions. And I would really, and this I would like to hear from you, Seth, and here maybe put on your hat as an implementing, as an organization of IFAD that's implementing programs and also working with the government. So what are the common issues that you face, in the use of evidence and data in your work?
Well, thank you so much, Vidisha, and I'm also sorry to be late. I have some other commitment. I would like to make this become very interesting for all of us here. As I'm working at the middle levels, I'm a country director for IFAD, but I sort of, try to fit between what client need and what IFAD can offer, and what is a mandate that we should follow through. Following this aspect, I would like to give some several feedback around this. So one is that on the strategic levels, basically between us and the government, which is our clients, normally we have some gap of language to talk about. We are focusing on resilience. We are focusing on poor people, leaving no one behind. Whereas governments that we are working with always focusing on, like Vision 2030. This morning we heard a lot from Thailand and China also talking about this capital market or budgeting management. So therefore, language, we need somehow to resolve sort of language and strategies. And this have really have implication on compatibilities between what methodologies that we use and what is the methodology and structure that government has been employed. And this is also, have sort of impact on ownership also, and also the way how we build the capacities of the government, the ways how we support the government. At the moment, IFAD have collaborate with other like World Bank and FAO to run the initiative of 50 by 2030 to really, become more demand-based approach toward the desire, need, use of data, as it was mentioned by my colleague, the director of planning from Ministry of Agriculture. So this is one aspect. Second aspect, in terms of the implementation, when we go down into the implementation of any surveys, data collections, we always come across with kind of, to have rigorous evaluations, and this will require more costly. So who bear the cost? IFAD, we now at the moment we do have some concessionality, but still this is a loan to the governments. I think it's similar case to World Bank and ADB also. It requires more cost, and therefore the cost efficiency have to be come into the picture. It's also it takes some time also. Rigorous surveys, data collection, methodology take a lot of time, and maybe it's not quick enough for us to be on the right time to resolve the problem, because we need to have graduations. We don't want to see where the project is already, in a bad shape. We want to really understand and the status, and also helping on the ways to adjust the project. And it is also important to take into consideration that the ways we do data collection is taking time of the farmer from the productive activity also. So time farmer do invest with us on this data collection. So it's very valuable information. And with this, we have to be very careful ways that we run the process through. Another important point on these evaluations, we are talking a lot about independent evaluation. It comes to the cultural perspective around this. When we're working with the beneficiaries, I hear some of our colleagues in another session who says, we have to be very respectful. And this is true, because this is unfriendly. We're talking about independent evaluation come. No one wants to see what is independent, why you are here and there. So it's very difficult, and the attitude of the people, person who do this evaluation has to be very careful so that we can get full information, share perspective from the beneficiary. Coming to the report and dissemination, there is require a lot of rigorous, complex analysis in the exercise. Like me, I don't know much about statistics, So I think many of the leadership in the government also will question why you conclude that here and there, what is your model here and there. It makes us very difficult to really understand. And when we don't understand, trust is going down. The level of the transparency is also not there. So this is one. Two, maybe also have conflicting with other report also. When the report coming out, there will be other. I think maybe other, but in fact, we have another process called independent evaluation process, which is done by the independent office also, like ADB. We also have project evaluation also, but somehow there is some information gap between that. So we need to align ourselves to use the independent evaluation as sort of benchmark to improve performance of ourselves. So issue of conflicting, results may also arise. Also, there is an issue of, link to policies, how the report will support the policy is always very ad hoc. If the government lies, like my colleague says, if they really want, so they push forward. If they just keep it aside. So there is no systematic ways how investment we have in this exercise will also really improve the policies of the government, which is really the big impacts that we would like to achieve. So from that, thank you so much. I hope this is clear and we can interact later. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth. And Anurag just wants to make a very short interjection before I hand it over to Karan.
I just wanted to compliment what Seth emphasized. See, independent evaluation matters. But whether an evaluation must be independent or internally done is contingent on the purpose of the evaluation, the user of the evaluation results. For instance, long ago we had undertaken an independent evaluation of students' learning outcomes in the schools of Delhi government. About 0.7 million students were evaluated. Very scientific, very rigorously, very believable independent evaluation undertaken. And the only problem was, because it was bad news, nobody owned it up. So it may have culminated into a paper, I don't know. Few years later, in 2016, we again decided census-based assessment this time, because the purpose was to focus on each student's learning outcomes. The sample couldn't have served the purpose. But we decided, and we put our foot down, that we will not have an independent evaluation. The respective class teachers will assess on the prescribed diagnostic tool their own students' reading levels, reading and arithmetic levels. And of course, there were fears of all kinds and all legitimate ones: data fudging, underreporting, overreporting, all kinds of things. And all those were genuine fears. Be that as it may, we decided to go ahead with the internal evaluation by the respective class teachers. Results came in, whatever the results, but few things stood out after the one. When we conducted debriefs with hundreds and thousands of teachers and principals, first, and some of the recurring patterns that emerged in those debriefs, first, hundreds of teachers saying that I thought majority of my students could read. Actually, majority of them can't read. And they were able to say it. And being able to say a bad news is a remarkable start to make it a good one. Two, many of the teachers said, oh, I finally know some of my students' names, because I had to fill it in the diagnostic tool. And that's a start of the pedagogical, nice things we keep talking about: understand your student, connect with your student. It starts by knowing your student's name. And it's a start. Should have happened long ago, but all right, whenever it happens, a good start. Hundreds and thousands of teachers again said, I know the students who I can bring up to the next level within a few weeks. And on their own saying this. Fast forward, within 37 working days, we got 23% children more to read. Because the system owned the process, they owned their own diagnostic tool, and with respect to the fears of the data of over-reporting and underreporting, almost, I think 29 schools reported more students as being unable to read in the end line than in the baseline. And that left us confused. I asked, what kind of teaching were you doing that you made the students forget to read? How did you achieve that? I mean, not teaching is one thing, or teaching them or to improve their reading levels is another. But how do you have more students unable to read at the end line than at the baseline? And both baseline and line done by the teachers themselves. And again, teachers and principals said, we lied in the baseline. We thought there'll be action. So we wanted to make our schools look good. So we said, oh, no, students can read. And over the course of serious, everyday, ordinary engagement, everybody realized that this is not to punish, this is to improve. This time we're telling the truth. So, yeah.
Thanks, Anurag. I think and Seth, those are really, really relevant examples that you give. One also has to view, in my opinion, the building of capacity as empowering, to build empowerment and ownership of the processes. And as Seth has rightly mentioned, the more complex and the more farther away you are from the evaluate the people that you, or the subjects that you evaluate, the more you are creating a power hierarchy and the less ownership there is. But anyway, I'll stop my own thoughts and I'll let actually Karan to respond to these allegations and allegations by Seth and Anurag.
Which allegations particularly?
The easiest one, the one that you can respond to the most easily.
No, I think, before I respond to those comments, wanted to build on what you were saying, Vidisha, about capabilities and people feeling that as an investment in themselves. I think, something else that, we have been doing is working with the national government in India, and through that, with different states and districts across the country on a competency-based approach to human resource management and performance management in some ways. And I think often there is this fear that in government, if you think about performance management or competencies, that it's not going to work well. People will resist it because it's a form of accountability. It's like saying, who are you to look at all the constraints I work under. So that there will be resistance. But actually, when we go and talk to bureaucrats at the state level, district level, even central government, there's a lot of recognition that actually the absence of support and absence of investment in us is demotivating. And at least this way, finally, you are making visible and showcasing success. A lot of senior bureaucrats in states have told us that actually we have really motivated officers whom we are not able to reward and recognize that brilliance because we don't have credible data to back that up. And whenever we come in and say we can do performance management not as a monitoring tool but as a tool to identify where the competency gaps are, so that the capacity building support then can be much more calibrated, it's often seen by people as an investment, and actually has on a very optimism positive side, it's actually been seen as a motivating tool. So I think I agree with what you were saying earlier, that investment in capabilities is seen as very motivating and actually helps to uncover some of these defensivenesses. I think really liked Seth's point on the cost of rigor and who pays that cost. I think a concept that I struggle with a lot, having come from academia, having come from a discipline that values rigor at the cost of other things, is this question of marginal value of rigor. And I think as a sector, as an evaluation sector, as an ecosystem, I think we need to get better at defining what the value from rigor is. It is important to have high quality studies. It is important to know the truth, as it were. But I think it's also important to recognize that truth serves a purpose if it is used to improve, so that people's lives improve. And I think defining what that value of rigor is important, because then it can help us conceptually answer questions that Seth raised. If it is truly the case that a more credible, rigorous evaluation which is representative at a very granular level and therefore is 10 times more expensive. If without that, the data will not be used by the decision maker, then yes, I think it's important to invest those resources because the ROI is high. But I think often we've seen in the sector that that investment takes place. There's a really strong investment in rigor, which then actually, comes at the cost of the data not being used to admit failures. Anurag has given an example, and I think the cost of that additional rigor then is not worth the value. So I think as a sector we need to become much better at defining why are we doing rigorous work, what are we trying to achieve through that, and then hold ourselves accountable as a sector, as multilateral, bilateral organizations, as consulting organizations that work with governments. I think we need to hold ourselves more accountable to say, are we achieving our ultimate goals of social change, people's lives improving, socioeconomic improvements through our work, or are we not? And if we are not, what should we do differently? So I think I really enjoyed Seth's question about who will pay that cost of rigor, and I think it's an important question because I think answering that question does require us to define and hold ourselves accountable to the value of rigor. We did a 10-year retrospective at ID Insight last year, where we found that a lot of our projects actually, achieved some impact, some unanticipated impact, but enough projects actually had no impact, and I think that statistic should, is a negative way of saying, hey, you have all these projects that did not achieve any impact, so how are you counting yourself as a good organization? The other is to say, actually changing government decisions is so hard that actually if we're able to achieve, even in 5% of the cases, if you're able to achieve change, that's actually a big track record. So I think no, the answer is not 5%, it's much more than that. But I think it's important for all of us to learn to hold ourselves, as I think Danny or somebody else on the panel said, not taste of our own medicine, which is, we evaluate the government. I think it's important for us to evaluate ourselves in those metrics of, are we actually improving people's lives or not?
Thanks, Karan. So broadly, in this discussion, I'm seeing a few emerging areas of agreement that we think are essential. One is that there's the need for internal capacity as not only just to do the work well, to do our own work well, but also because it empowers us to reflect on ourselves, and that also that as external organizations that are working with the government, we have to meet them halfway to really be relevant for their needs. But at the same time, I also see that there's a need to push the boundary, and Karan, you said there's this marginal cost of innovation and rigor, and is it worth it to pay? I mean, the way I would see it is that it's really our duty to be able to push the boundaries and to produce better data and evidence, because we don't know what we don't know, and there has to be. It's also our role to go out there and explore better and more rigorous methods and tools. And perhaps one way in which the community, the data community, is thinking about it is innovations around data using machine learning, and there are tons of data visualization tools and dashboards that are helping people to use data. So Seth, Anurag, and Mr. McMoney, I just want to get your views on the role of data innovations, and where do you think is the state's capacity to absorb innovations? Maybe we start first with Anurag, you?
A quick comment on, our goal or purpose should not be better data. Our goal should be to have better public service delivery, and only push the boundaries required to meet that end. Otherwise, it's collecting, analyzing, evaluating data which serves in the realm of governance beyond public service delivery. I don't know what other purpose will the data serve. A quick comment to what Karan said. See, very often, and it's a frontline functionaries in government who often bear the brunt of collecting all the data for the government, so that the people higher up or in different branch or headquarter offices can analyze those data points in the dashboards and make sense of different programs or policies of the government. Uh, and that how that burden on the frontline functionary gets unfolded becomes important. If I'm the frontline functionary, is it adding to my work? If it's adding to my work, then in all likelihood, I will make that data filling or the data collection process a mechanical task devoid of any relevance to my everyday work. Can it be seamlessly fused in my everyday ordinary activities? If I have to collect the same data in a mobile app now, am I still required to collect it on the register? And if I'm still required to collect on the register, to hell with the app then. And then I will start doing that mechanically. The data's integrity will be compromised, and we'll have perhaps next conference on the data integrity. But to answer your question on the data innovation, I mean, I know for a fact Government of India uses absolutely very advanced tools of machine learning to track income tax returns. So that is not a good news, but it is what it is. I think few things that definitely need to happen, and unfortunately, this is one of the biggest gaps that I've seen in public service delivery, not just in India, but in most parts of the world. From a citizen lens, if I'm the citizen, every government across the world has hundreds of schemes, from health, nutrition, bus, tickets, rail passes, vouchers, hundreds of kinds of schemes every government has in every realm and sphere of governance. But I, as a citizen, can't be expected to know all of them. I should not be knowing all of them. I should know only what's relevant to me. So one of the really immediate and very important area of using data science or innovation is how do we make or how do we use data science to make information or organize information in a manner that is useful and relevant to a citizen. And that doesn't just mean a few filters like put in your demographics, your gender, age, whatever, and it'll show you the government scheme. That's one part of it. Two, sometimes citizens often don't know in the administrative terms what they're looking for. They know what they're looking for. They may not have the necessary administrative language to communicate what they know already about their need. So I'm just imagining even a simple website, I mean, it's not simple at the back end, but from a front lens point of view, which says, can I just type and say, I need kidney dialysis? Is there a government program that can sponsor my kidney dialysis? There is none. There's only 3 governments in the world which have done so, and there are 200 plus countries. So, I mean, I will keep going back to improvement of public service deliveries, because we can say whatever we say, but hundreds of millions of people are in poverty, and those above it not necessarily having the great life. They may just be above the World Bank defined line of the poverty. So that public service delivery angle becomes extremely important for the innovations, both in evaluation in terms of how we improve it and the government's effectiveness as well.
Thanks, Anurag. Mr. McMoney?
Thank you again. I think this is important issues that we need to thinking for the data innovation. The first point, I just focus on the capacity building. It is very important that if the data collected without unquality or uncertainty, so everything will be fair. So the first thing is that the capacity building is very important to include into the rule of the innovation. And the second, I think that in terms of the capacity building, but also we need also investment that can construct this data innovation will success. And the last one is the support from stakeholder. It is necessary that we have to work together, we have to link together, we have to share together in order to strengthen the data innovation. I just have the 3 points for sharing in this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth?
Okay, thank you. So innovation, right? So I just put one example in my country, basically long times ago, but not now. Okay, now they remove this out. I saw one place they says that okay, sorry for the slow process because of our computerized system. So it doesn't really make sense, okay? But right now, because of the technologies, because of the humans' development skills here and there, innovation can be happen. I strongly believe that we can do differently. We can use innovation to resolve a lot of the issue. The purpose for these evaluations, this innovation has to be somehow, give us a good time for evaluation. It's not the wrong time. So anything we need, we can have it. Result, we can have it. So this is purpose number one. Purpose number two, it has to be cost efficient. Okay. Number three, it has to increase trust and transparency. We don't want the situation that, okay, this is debatable or this is here, maybe somebody can interpret in different way also. So I think with these three purposes, there is some things that we can done. For example, I'll give you some example. Using this, remote sensing or geolocation satellite imageries to really as a tool for the evaluation. So this is number one. Maybe also try to work with the national data. My colleague mentioned about agriculture and social census. So rather than try to do it again, those are the very rigorous process already there and cover a lot. In Cambodia, we have a lot there, so just use that. Maybe also tapping into some data availabilities that really is a daily life of the farmer. I give you example. The banks give a loan, unsecured loans to the farmer because they collect information on the use of the electricity and water supply. So this may explain something how ways that farmer be able to pay back to the bank. So we can also try smartly in terms of try to collect data here and there, use existing mechanism that is already in place so that we can, make it more reliable, not questionable, and maybe also cost efficiency for us. So this just initial thinking, but I hope this gives you some idea something can be done over from my side.
Thank you, Seth. I think among the three commentators, you are very bullish about innovations, data innovations, and the capability of the state to really absorb these and implement it. So that's really good to hear. I think we have broadly come to the end of our panel discussion, and I would like to open the floor for questions. So happy to take a round of questions. Maybe we can take three together and then we can have. Please do specify if your question is directed to any specific panelist, please do mention that. And if not, then I request the panelists to just take any question that you think you have a point to make. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Chung, and I'm from Protean Consulting in Malaysia. And thank you for sharing a lot about this data innovation, data collection, and also data capacity. And what I see is there's a lot of need for data literacy before data can be used meaningfully in the government sector, and especially at the grassroots sector, where grassroots level, where we have to collect a lot of this data. I wonder about, have you considered about the literacy level of grassroots the informant when you have to gather data from them? If the literacy level is not there, therefore you have to use enumerators, and that probably will then compromise some data quality and definitely will drive up the cost, right? And I also, remember the panel talking about collecting data from teachers, okay? In terms of, and then when the teachers realize that how the data is being used, then they become more honest in saying that, oh, we actually lied at the baseline. This then goes back to feedback. A lot of times as evaluators, as data collectors, we collect a lot of data from informants, but we do not share feedback with them. And because feedback are not shared, people do not know how data is being used. They're, like in my country, teachers collect a lot of data, and the burden is on them to collect the data, and they often complain that these data are being fed into a black hole, right? It increases their burden, but they don't know what is it being used for. So is there a way, to give feedback back to these informants to at least help them to see how this data, how this information that they're giving to us, are being used, and therefore for the next round, this will drive out data quality, the quality of data that we are trying to capture from them, if they see the use of the data. That's all.
Thank you. I think there were two questions here.
All right, okay. My name is Alper Dinçer. I am from Independent Evaluation Department of EBRD. Thank you very much for this very refreshing session. I learned a lot. My question is to Mr. Nagpal. He mentioned about this marginal value of rigor. Here it is, in your opinion, I'm thinking about like a typical evaluation work that you do for, I guess, for ID insights, right? It is, where do you see the highest marginal value? In which dimension? What we should do more in evaluation to get the highest value?
Yeah, I'm Sanat Manage, representing Save the Children Sri Lanka. So I think at the beginning of the panel discussion, you highlighted, I think Bidisa highlighted that AI technology so that we can use for this, especially for this social research, right? For the data analysis and this. So I like to ask, so what is your experience, for anybody have any experience or using that AI technology for this data collection? And the other one also I like to ask, because the collecting of data for the surveys or monitoring of that thing, there's going to be a huge cost for some time and also time consuming. But if you are not collecting the right data for right time, and also if you are not using the data for right percentage, there is going to be a huge problem. Is there any study conducted by you or any organization related to the what are the percentage of the data collected used for the evidence? And then what are the gaps there? Why people are not using those data? Why unfortunately you collecting a lot of data, also those kind of things, right?
Can I direct I think that the question there had actually two parts on data literacy and its implication on cost, but more broadly, the recurring theme is around cost of data collection. Karan, if you could reflect on that. Data feedback to participants. Anurag, if you could take that. And again, AI for data collection. Karan, if you could just reflect on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I think in terms of cost of data collection, it is high. I think one of our sort of when we started trying to work with different organizations on data use, we realized that often data that is needed isn't there because it takes time to collect. I think as Anurag alluded to this earlier, right, that you need the data today or next week and it's only going to come next year. The reason for that is that A, it's costly and it's time consuming. So what we have been doing is trying out a number of innovations on can we actually reduce the cost and time of data collection. So one branch of that experimentation is around sampling frames. There, we have started experimenting with using sort of satellite based methods of building sampling frames, sampling from them. So in India, for example, the gold standard is to do household listing. The next best is to use voter rolls, which are fairly representative at the household level, even if, there are going to be, migration sometimes causes them not to be, fully accurate at the individual level, but at the household level, voter rolls are pretty good in rural areas. In urban areas, the challenge with voter rolls is that it's very hard to actually find those people. And so we've started in our partnership with the state government actually experimenting with using satellite images to do sampling, again to reduce the cost and time of data collection. I think the third thing is around data quality audits. So a traditional government or an organization like us, when we are doing data collection, would have a data quality audit mechanism where there are back checks and sort of spot checks to assess the accuracy of the data that's being collected. One thing we have been experimenting with is, can we use machine learning to actually flag some of these observations? Can we use that to prioritize which observations to spot check or back check? And can we use AI based or ML based methods to then give much more faster feedback back to enumerators? So when you're doing a large scale data collection, the enumerator, each day you will be collecting about data on 1,000, 2,000, 20,000 households, from a group of 100 to 500 enumerators. If you don't give them, if they've made a mistake in how they understood the question, or if they've made a mistake in coding an enumerator response, and if you don't tell them that day, then you're going to really make a mistake for even more observations. So it's very important to have a faster turnaround time. And again, we've been using machine learning, and so we record audios for the when the enumerator is doing a survey, we record the audio with consent of the respondent. And we have been experimenting with methods of using audio to also flag which observations require more checks or not. So I think there are efforts that we have been doing, and some of these are bearing fruit, some of these are not. Goes back to talking about innovations, right? That's, I think we as a sector need to become better at accepting failure, because innovation is about trying something new. And if we, often one of them, in my experience working with governments, what the resistance to innovation comes from not being able to admit that, oh, this didn't work out. And so I think, some of the things that we have done have worked out in terms of sampling frames. Machine learning to identify data quality has been a much slower progress. Back to Alfredo, was that name? Sorry. Alfred. Your question about highest value of evaluation. So I think in my experience, where rigor has really paid off has been in the context of results-based financing or development impact bonds, where we have sort of entered into arrangements where a funder or a private investor would say, I will pay the NGO X amount of money if they're able to credibly and demonstrably show that their program improved outcomes by this much. Or GiveWell, which is a sort of effective altruist aligned organization funder, wants to know if you are giving malarial bed nets or vaccinations, or what is the precise estimate of how many lives is that actually saving. And so I think in those type of contexts, rigor becomes really important. And being rigorous then has helped these nonprofits for which we have done the evaluations in an independent evaluation, right? So we've been hired by a funder to evaluate the NGO, so it's an independent evaluation. Rigor is super important, and the rigor is high stakes. So whether or not, we worked with this nonprofit in India called Educate Girls, whose model is to bring out of school girls back into schools. And the objective we're trying to measure them against was learning outcome gains. And so whether or not they were able to achieve a certain learning outcomes gain was super important for them, because if they were not, they would not get that payout from the funder. And so I think it was very high stakes. It was a three-year program. Each year we did that measurement. In the first 2 years, they were below where they needed to be as a target, And so similar to any government organization or any sort of multilateral bank program officer who the evaluation is showing you're not having effects, there was a sense of defensiveness initially of, it must be a problem with your measurement, must be a problem with some other exogenous factor. But then they realized, look, if we don't actually use the data to identify how we can fix, then we are not going to get this payout. So year 3, actually, they shot really up because they used data to improve. Why? Because there was high stakes payout at the end. So I think that's where the evaluation has been useful. I think in governments, often, going back to Anurag's point earlier, a lot of that benefit needs to be defined in terms of data use. I think Sir asked this question around, do we do a good tracking of how much data is actually being used? It's a great study. I don't know of our organization or any other doing it. There is an example from the Indian state of UP where there's a technical support unit, and what they do is they track this data use tracker to say, we produce this data point, which meeting referred to that data in the minutes and what action was taken and all of that. But I think that's a rare example. I think it'll be really nice if all of you, either in your own government organizations or if you work with organizations that then work with government organizations, start encouraging them to actually do a data use tracker and say how much of this data that you guys have is being used. And if it's not being used, why do you collect it? A lot of the response, sir, is because of status quo bias. The fact that somebody 40 years ago asked them to start collecting the data. Nobody in government ever says, don't do something, because they're like, what if that data might be useful, And so we have these interesting anecdotes of somebody saying from the statistics department in a state government in India that, the governor in 70, 80 had asked us to collect price information on 14 commodities, and we still provide them that regularly. We recently had a meeting with the governor's office and we asked them, how do you use this data? And they said, we don't. I don't know why you guys send it. And they were like, oh, because, they were like, you also keep sending, so we also receive it. It's like, why don't you guys tell us that you don't need it? They were like, why do you guys send it? So,
Anurag, sorry to cut you off. Anurag and then Seth. Actually, Seth, why don't you go first? Yeah.
Do you want to go first? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, just want to add, this is very important. That's why I need to contribute to this. So in terms of data quality, we create a lot of bureaucracy to, control the data, right? We have audit to come, and we have another supervisor to come. So I don't know whether it's really best use of money, whether really best use of resource and system are really useful for us. This is still a lot of question marks around many the policy makings, not only with us, but also with the government as well. So there are two questions around here. So one is that, what is the incentive of the data collector to collect a right data, not to fake the data? So this is number one. Number two, what is incentive of the beneficiary to answer correctly? Because they may, if I say I need, and if I say I'm poor, I may have something government will help me. So there's so much difficulty around that. Also, in my case, there is a system to collect price information from, asking the farmer to give price here and there. But whether it is useful, people have a lot of questions in terms of data. So source is put a lot, but usefulness may be question mark and give us waste of the resource as well. So I would suggest that, look into the existing system. For example, like bank, as I was told you, in order for the bank to give money to, lending money to the farmer, they create this call of business plan or something like that. They look it into this, farmer had to comply with the business plan to get into the bank. So those information will be very useful for us without going to collect information, another information from them. Another thing can be done also using image rather than try to question them. Image can tell us a lot. So this is the 2 points I would like to make. On the AIs, it is very good, but who trusts? If the government, even myself, when talking with the guy, I will not in a hesitation to say this is from the result of AI. You know, this is computerized system. Who built this? We don't know. What is the process inside that? So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Anurag?
You know, when I was studying computer science, we used to have this portal where we needed to upload assignments. And this is an example that will prove that sometimes whatever the frontline functioner is put in, nobody bothers upward. So the portal was there. We needed to upload assignments on a regular basis. And the portal, because of certain deadlines that the professor used to assign, used to not accept assignment after the prescribed deadline. So once, and actually not once, I remember having done it far too many times until one day I was caught. And my assignment was not done, but the deadline was literally a few minutes later. So I uploaded a random PDF. The only thing was professors found out, a professor would have taken fortnight plus time before he started reviewing, by which time I would say I inadvertently uploaded the wrong file. Here is the right file, which buys me sufficient time. The point I'm trying to get at is, and that's when I learned quite early the wrong incentive, that if the people upward are not reading, at some stage you can just enter A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H as someone's name. And if you don't get a call back or a message or any call out in the meeting, then the message to the frontline functionary is loud and clear that we don't bother, but we will ensure compliance because we have control over you. So that's the message. How we tried to break the deadlock was, let me give two different kind of examples. One slightly larger scale, one my own commission. We used to collect students' data, attendance data every time. I mean, not used to, still do. Roughly about 2.5 million students every day's attendance in real time. The problem with that was the same. Teachers, after a while, programs get launched with fanfare. Everybody marks attendance on the tab, and then nobody bothers to check. And before you know, barely 5% teachers are marking the attendance online because nobody cares. And we started working with that. That 4.8% was when I took over. So we started working 5%. And we started using the data. We identified trends and patterns with IdenSight as partner. Students who are frequently or regularly absent, we tried to find out the cause of their absence through a regular helpline, SMS, IVR, WhatsApp, chatbot, etc. In some cases, home visit as well. And we found a bunch of things. For instance, thousands of students stopped coming to school because they lost a parent on a certain day. And it's literally, the graph was, they were attending the school, the father or the mother dies, and they stopped attending the school. So when we did simple number crunching on attendance data, and we found some students suddenly stopped coming, and we found out the cause. We identified 2,045 such children who lost a parent. And then we started providing support to them and informing teachers that this student of yours didn't come because he or she lost a parent. Teachers started to realize the power of them clicking the attendance. Similarly, we found 56 odd children who were being trafficked, who just went missing. The reason we identified it as early date was because we were tracking attendance. And when we started breathing down the neck of the police, asking them to find the students who were missing, in many cases, they did find the children. And when we informed the teachers, in every single instance, every single teacher was informed that it is because of your click of absent and present that we could support this. We could identify the student who lost a parent. We could identify this child and prevent that child from being trafficked. So closing that loop and that celebration, and even if it's not done publicly, it's not great recognition, it's not money, it's not prize, it's not Nobel. I mean, we're not giving any teacher a Nobel Prize for marking attendance on the tab. But that closing of the loop, saying, oh, my clicking of this button of student absent and present today brings the child back, is a remarkable incentive for a lot of officers, and especially frontline functionaries to keep doing more honestly what Seth said. What is the incentive for the data filler and whose data is filled to fill it accurately? So that celebration, that sense of, and this is what I've come to learn, most people have remarkable innate sense of goodness. By closing the loop and showing them the relevance and the effectiveness of their little action called clicking the button with students absent and presence mark, can appeal to their innate sense of goodness. And trust me, they will do a better job. We started with 5% students tracking. We reached 80% in under a year. So that's one of the concrete examples of how you close the loop and how you build better systems for evaluation, much more than evaluation, for improving public service delivery. The last point, and this happened, and unfortunately, at least in India, this is the case, I don't know elsewhere, senior officers don't check the dashboards on their own. They get the juniors, the executive assistants, to check the dashboards and give them the information that they ask the executive assistant to provide. In part, there's nothing wrong with it. That's why you have executive assistant, but in part, there's everything wrong about it. And which is that you are not applying your mind to what insights you can draw from there. So we, at my commission, used to monitor the data use, or when was the last login, what activity did you undertake, etc. kind of things, at a very rudimentary level, to say that are we using the data? And if there is a data point that we're not using for a very long time, it's really the time we should drop it, or else the governor will continue receiving those reports which governor will never read. Or, for example, the Indian government schools still has a teacher for typewriter, in 2023. So yeah, things will just continue.
I see that the time is up, and I'm really sorry that we could not fit in more questions, but I'm sure, all the panelists will be around and we'll be very happy to chat otherwise. But just before we wrap up, can I have, from all panelists, one key phrase that you would like the audience to take away from this panel? Seth, starting with you.
Okay. Key word from my side is 3 words. Simple, simple, and simple. Just that.
Okay, the keyword from my thinking is data is the extreme fundamental for analysis, for the evaluate, and also for the develop of anything for the benefit of the country. Thank you.
From my side, the 3 words would be the cost and value of evaluations.
Actually, it's not evaluation, it's learning. So we can do better, we will do better if only we learn.
Thank you very much, audience, for your presence, for your interaction.
3 words from your side.
The 3 words I would like to leave you with is that data can be empowering, so let's use it the right way. Thank you.